If you were gonna make something, what would it be? Here's my answer. Son, we're going to your Opa's cottage. Your grandfather is Dutch, so we call him Opa. And we're going to his cottage, up north. Whoa! I know, wild stuff, but be warned. It's an 8-hour drive. Your 5-year-old mind is going to melt if you don't do something about it, so be prepared. If I could bring only one game with me for that car ride, what would it be? That's the game I want to make. Something I wouldn't want to put down for those 8 hours. I love turn-based JRPGs. As a 5-year-old, I never got far in them. But I love them. If the battle system is addictive and the story is binge-worthy, those 8 hours will fly by. I might even miss them. You play as a fugitive queen and her whipping boy as the queen journeys for vengeance. Her and her whipping boy's biggest obstacle is her own ego. That's a neat premise and all, but what do I want out of the game? Simple. I want to address the things that annoy me about one of my favorite genres. Item hoarding, boring battles, lame side quests, debuffs and status effects that don't do anything, grinding that isn't at least interesting, feeling like you need to grind, and stories that ain't tickling my picklin', okay? This is my first commercial game. I don't want it to be too long, so I think 6 to 8 hours for a turn-based Japanese-style RPG ain't too bad. A small-scale game starts with a small-scale story. I scribbled a rough treatment of the story. A treatment is a 20 or so page run-through of the narrative. Mine's 40. That's not me bragging, I have a problem. It is pretty rough though. I mean, the queen's name is Queen and the whipping boy's name is Whip. They're temp names, of course. I'd share more, but I'm not going to. Is it because I'm scared someone might steal my ideas? No. Trust me, it's all in execution. I'm confident that ideas are worthless. My issue is that when you share your ideas, the energy or the hype that you have for your ideas doesn't make it onto the page. It's instead spewed forth from your excited lips. The thing is too, you can picture the whole thing in your head, but the person you're telling can't. So when you inevitably don't capture all the tiny details that make your idea so compelling, the person you're talking to isn't nearly as impressed as you'd hoped. That can bring your mood or excitement down, and that's what you'll end up putting onto the page. I don't want that. But didn't I just share some of my story earlier? Yes, that was the premise. It's way too general, and I'll have to share it anyway to pitch this story. I will say this though, writing with gameplay in mind is weird, especially as someone who writes novels and short stories. Branching dialogue and NPC chatter threw me off the most. Also, story flags make flavor text 10 times harder. A town full of NPCs have their set dialogue, a big story moment happens, and now I've got to change it all. My jimmies weren't rustled, but they were tickled. Anyway, it's done and over with. I'm going to put some distance between me and the draft so I can look at it with fresh, Vaselined eyes.
In the meantime, I'm going to work on one of the most important things for any game. What might that be? What could be the next step in building this monolith? What should I head towards? The concrete. I'm going to try to fail as fast as possible.
That's crazy talk, sir, and I don't appreciate it.
Hold on now, let me explain. What this means is that I'm building the most bare-bones version of my game. No polish, no pretty graphics. It'll be the gameplay loop and only the essentials needed for the player to experience it. That way, I can identify root problems early and fix them, then put a pretty coat of paint on top of it. It's better than building all this code and polish on a faulty base, only to have to uproot it later. Imagine painting all the walls to your house before laying down the foundation. What are you going to do with all that pretty drywall? Half of it won't even fit into the floor plan. So the game's going to look like this for a little while. Just some pentagons and black squares, right? Like, so the player can tell who the player character is, who the NPCs are, what's a walkable area and what isn't, which direction characters are facing. Just, it's what they need in order to mechanically understand what is happening in the game. Seeing as the field portion is sort of taken care of, I'm going to focus on battles. In particular, the defensive minigame. Ooh, the defensive minigame! I want this to be readable and fair. One thing that frustrated me about Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door is that sometimes reading the timing can get... What am I doing wrong? See, I can't tell if I'm too early, too late. I can do it fine with the regular Goomba, but the spiky Goomba I can't. I want more feedback. God forbid I use a character with a different silhouette from Mario. Now how do I time this? If I want to build something functional and I'm asking for precise timing for inputs, then I need something that's super readable. Let's take a look at some classics. Step me
Mania, baby! Yeah, DDR! Yeah! Oh yeah! Perfect! Stop! Get that! Stomp on it! Yeah! I choose violence! Step Mania and DDR have bright and noisy backgrounds, yet I'm able to tell just fine what's going on. Arrows are brightly lit and have bold outlines. I get bright, color-coded, written feedback on how accurate my steps were. I can tell visually if I'm early or late because of the alignment of the arrows. Deltarune does something similar with its attack minigame. There's no visual noise because the window for the minigame is visually noiseless. The slider fits perfectly with the marker. When it's stopped, it fades out and shows the degree to which the slider was aligned or misaligned. No ambiguity. Easy to read. There's an interview with Toby Fox, I forget where and with who, where he said his reason for picking a bullet hell minigame is because readability is at an all-time high. That's why he chose contrasting, bright colors against the plain black, this thing, the void! There's no room for extraneous visual noise. That way, when the player messes up, they feel like it's their fault. So you see, it's not just about being fair, but also gaslighting the player. So it's time to make a super simple, scuffed mockup. I'm using a background from Dragon Quest II for the Super Famicom, just as a quick but reasonable visual background noise, to see if the minigame is readable. I added an opacity layer to darken the background. The status windows are just black boxes for now. The sliders look like the shoulder buttons. This is all I'm going to do with this mockup. Remember, I'm trying to fail as fast as possible on a functional level. Oh, you know what? This mockup just gave me an idea for a variation of this minigame. What if each status window has their own set of shoulder buttons and the player must use directional buttons to toggle which set you will operate to block enemy attacks? Do you hear that? Okay, so the idea is that enemies attack in a sequence, uninterrupted. The attacks will rain down from the top of the screen towards the status window. Turns are quick. I want them to be snappy. The more enemies there are, the more sliders that spawn. The shape of the slider will match with their attack, but that's polish that'll have to wait. The marker will also match the slider silhouette, so that players can time when to stop the slider. That will also have to wait, because I don't want to polish a turd. And I don't know if I have a third or a third sandwich. The faster the enemies, the faster the sliders. But what about slider frequency? Wouldn't it be neat if I had fast but infrequent sliders, or slow but frequent sliders? I can base the speed on the enemy's speed stat because it's speed. What about frequency? Frequency stat? Sure. But how do I handle the timing of inputs? I mean, it seems simple. If slider position equals marker position and player presses input, then they get a big ol' smooch, right? No. I want to show you something. This man's name is Asai. He plays Clone Hero. Sorry, I misspoke. He makes Clone Hero his bitch, casually. There are two things I want you to notice about this. Look how much leeway he has for the timing of inputs for fast charts. Now, watch him try to play through the fire and flames on 1% speed.
What? This is really hard! How do you hit this?
The timing window didn't change, but now Asai can't get a visual read on the timing, because it's not actually about where the notes are in relation to the markers. It's about this sort of hidden timer, at least that's what I think. So that when I program the thing and I'll program the timer and then, alright, time to get them their graphics in that their game. Okay, let's see how it looks. Oh god, what's wrong with Righty? Let's give him a quick fix and, oh no. Okay, that's pretty good. Sigh, how do I even start? I need to draw up a game plan. Psst, hey, over here. I want to talk to you a little bit. Are we far away from him? Good. Now I can speak candidly. My boy Caden worked pretty dang hard on this video. That don't mean shit, but if you think this video is worth other people seeing, maybe consider putting us in the algorithm's nice list. You can do that by leaving a comment, a like, or a dislike, nobody will know, and pressing the soft spot of that subscribe button. Maybe do the same to the little bell too, And hey, stay classy. Alright, so I'm gonna start with one projectile at a time. That's it. I also added a stunned state so that if you egregiously mistime a button press, you'll have to wait for the projectile to hit you before the game will register another button press. That way, the game prevents mashing. Now I'm just gonna make it so that the enemy entity picks between left or right, represented by 1 or 0. Okay, it didn't work. I guess the game just wasn't meant to be. Oh, I just forgot how to do the random function. Silly me. Hell yeah, brother. Alright, let's get that slider moving. Oh my god. My game is coming to life. It's important that I learn how long it takes for the slider to reach the marker. I could just measure the pixel distance. Why do I need the pixel distance? Well, if it's moving 1 pixel every frame, then that's how long it takes when I divide velocity over time. But now I have to make an important decision. What should the timing window be? What would feel fair, but challenging, but also help balance the game? Who cares? I just want to make sure that this shit works. 3-frame window, baby! Time to get into hacker lesbian mode. I got my shades, my trench coat, my purple lipstick, my fingerless gloves, and my disregard for the law. Alright, let's check it out. Why? So the problem was that the game thought the player was pressing the left input on the first frame for some reason. Alright, so I just fixed that up and, perfect. The fadeaway could use a little work though. For some reason, RPG Maker MV automatically uses anti-aliasing. It's a pixel art engine. Why? So you have to bend over backwards to get this working. You gotta go into the index file and change some stuff, and then you gotta get a plugin, and anyway, I got the left side working. But I still need to make it so that if the slider speed is different, the timer is still in sync with it. I gotta do some math. Okay, so if this is the distance and this is the time, this one, then how would that timer is this and this is divided by that? But no, wait. All right, I think I got it. How can I tell if it's working? I had a little audio feedback thing set up. Why can't you hear it? Because while I was recording my screen, I was listening to music while recording. Copyrighted music, to be specific. But it worked. I'm a hacker lesbian math man. So I'm not going to work on the right slider just yet. All I do is copy-paste some stuff, right? What I am going to work on is the tracker.
What's the tracker?
Great question! Here's a single chocolate chip from this cookie. So for rhythm games, they have charts. These charts do not vary once they've been charted. The game determines which button to press based on how far along the player is through the chart. My game, because there's a lot of variance, I can't do that. I have to tell a tracker which input to look for and when the player is supposed to press it. How do I tell it that? Here's the plan. Remember that timer I was talking about? Each slider has its own timer. The tracker keeps track of each timer, and whenever that timer is associated with the left or right button. If the player presses the correct button when the timer is within a certain range, then the player gets a successful tap. If no timer is within range, the player is stunned and has to wait for the nearest timer to reach 0, as in, take a hit, before they can try to press the correct button at the right time again. It's not registering my inputs. Why? At first I thought I was just shit at timing suddenly, so I made the timing window bigger. That didn't work, so I tried some troubleshooting. I reduced the amount of slider spawning entities to 1, and this happened. I'm not pressing anything, but at least I've narrowed down the problem. Let me just look through the script here. I think it's because I forgot to tell the tracker that I'm no longer pressing the left button, and there we go. Now let's expand this to the other slider spawning entities, and... Why? RPG Maker MV doesn't allow you to have a code block longer than 12 lines. If you put 2 blocks of code together, the program doesn't recognize it as continuous. Because I have a string of if-else statements here, and the final else falls into the second block of code, the program thinks that it's always meeting the else condition. What is the result of this condition? Getting stunned. So the game thinks it's supposed to be stunning the player. Whoops. I'll just put the whole thing in 1 block. Okay, what if I tried this? Still no. What if I changed that? Still no. This? No. That? No. And don't ask me why I decided that this was the time to implement the right shoulder button. Maybe I just wanted to feel like I was making progress. I mean, I got it working at least. In fact, I just sat here a while and enjoyed my victory, hitting the inputs in time, stringing out the euphoria. Why must it end? Oh, I even made it so that if you press the button within the perfect timing window, the game will actually place the slider right in the middle of the marker regardless of where it's actually stopped. You know, for the extra feedback. Please don't make me go back to solving the problem. Look here, I implemented the attack frequency and got that working, as well as an enemy attack queue so that the sliders and their effects match which... Dear God, I have to do this thing, don't I? Okay, I don't know what I did, but it seems to be working. I can't hit the timing correctly for some of the sliders, but maybe that's just me, right? Please let it not be a problem with my programming. Can we ship the game now? Okay, so I got to programming some debugger things, and there is something wrong. Notice that when I press the button, these red squares, indicate when I'm pressing it, and any of these numbers is less than 2, sometimes it still doesn't register. Look at this number at the top here. It's supposed to go 1, 2, and then 3, but it's not. It goes 1, 2, and then 1. Before starting at 1 again. There's an issue with the way the slider spawning entities communicate with the tracker. The first one is supposed to communicate with the tracker, telling it to look out for the first slider. Then once the first slider is missed or hit, the second entity tells it to look out for the second, and then the third with the third. Hence, 1, 2, and then 3. But it's not. I tried so many things to get it to work, but basically, I had to scrap the tracker. Instead, what I'm going to do is have each slider spawning entity tag in the next entity. So entity 1 spawns a slider, and right now, the variable slider equals 1. Once the player gives their input, entity 1 will respawn, depending on the player's timing, and then set the slider equal to 2. That way, even if other sliders have spawned, the only slider the player's input affects will be slider 2, and... It works! Baby, I'm coming home! The war is over! Yes! Next, I can implement something like a minigame where you have to press the proper shoulder button as fast as possible. Oh, and a minigame where you have to collect materials and craft, and another minigame that's an open world, and another that's an MMO, and another that has randomly generated terrain. What the fuck am I talking about? Oh no, it's them. Who? You can't mean... The feature creep! Well, that's the end of the video. Stay tuned to see if we get fucking killed. Bye now.